So I'm going to have a little talk about jigglers today. I have 3. I have 2 canners, so occasionally I have them both running at the same time. Now this is the weight that comes with most Presto canners when you buy them. This will depend on the model. It's generally supplied, I believe, with canners that are expected to work as dial gauge canners. Now this is more of a safeguarding feature. So it's a 15-pound weight, it's all fully moulded. You cannot take that apart. And what that does is that then keeps an eye on the pressure. If the pressure goes up to 15 pounds, if your gauge is out or you're not quite paying attention, then this will start to jiggle. And if this starts to jiggle, you've gone over pressure and you need to check your gauge and get it recalibrated. Now, calibrating gauges in the UK is not necessarily really possible. They say you should get them done at extension offices in the US, but these services are actually becoming fewer and further between. So that's that one. So that one came with my 23, which does have a dial gauge. I don't use it as a dial gauge canner because of the lack of calibration available. And frankly, my personal preference is for something a little more reassuring. So what I've done is I have altered my Presto 23 to run as a weighted gauge canner. Now I've done nothing to the canner itself. What I have done is I have purchased a weight, an appropriate weight. This was from Amazon. Cost about £15, I think, delivered. And that is 5, 10 and 15 pounds of pressure. Now most things that I do tend to be processed at 10 pounds of pressure. Providing you're under 1,000 feet, this is adequate for most things. There's some fruits and tomato recipes that call for 5 pounds of pressure, so we just remove the ring, 5 pounds of pressure. And if we've got anything, or if you're at a higher altitude, you stick on the 15 as well. Now this one is actually the weight that came with my smaller canner, my 16 quart, my little Sunny. Now this, as you can see, is very similar to the one that's come with my 23, the one that was supposed to act as a dial gauge canner. I don't use this weight for anything anymore. It's not necessary, unless I happen to be processing something at 15 pounds, but then I'll generally use this anyway. Now this one came with my smaller canner. Now my smaller canner, as you will have seen, doesn't have a pressure gauge on it anyway. It's designed to be used as a weighted gauge canner. So obviously they've taken that into account with the variable weight. Now, amongst the many reasons that I've chosen to run my canners as weighted gauge canners as opposed to dial gauge canners is A, the lack of ability to calibrate them in the UK. It's also a practical one. When you can hear the jiggler jiggling and you can see it doing its thing, you can get on with other things. You don't have to babysit it, you don't have to be standing next to the canner, making sure the gauge is right, adjusting the heat, and a lot of unnecessary faffing about, in my personal opinion. So at the moment, I can stick the weight on, I can get on, I can clean down the kitchen, I can not be paying full attention to what the canner is doing because I know that I can hear when it starts to jiggle. I know to set my timers. Obviously I'm paying a vague amount of attention. I'm making sure I'm listening out for it. As soon as that starts jiggling, I then start my timing processes. So I can even quite happily sit down with a cup of tea in the other room. I can hear my canner jiggling. I know that it's doing what it should. I know that it's processing properly. So I'm not worried. When it comes to the end of the time, come in, it's still jiggling away, can turn it off. But I do make sure that I can hear the canner the whole way through, just in case the temperature does fluctuate, the pressure does fluctuate and go under the threshold. So that is my little talk about jigglers. I know this is a thing that tends to confuse some people, especially beginners. Obviously you read the instructions, and if it's a dial gauge canner, it wants you to use it as a dial gauge canner. This isn't necessary, nor is it, to my belief, unsafe to alter the canner in this way. It's using the process that some of them are designed for anyway. Just because it's got a dial doesn't mean you have to use it as a dial gauge canner. You can get your variable weight. Okay.